Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining me, although we're more similar time zones now. Um,
Yeah.
so, okay, so our topic today is when disabilities are criminalized, and your story is a great example in some tragic ways of how society does not best serve people with disabilities. So, as a quick recap, and then we'll let you tell more details. So, you have more recently been diagnosed with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, but at the time of what we're talking about, you were not diagnosed, but of course had the
No.
symptoms because it's a lifelong disability. Um, and so so that's part of your story, obviously a very important part of your story. But also there was at one point you were arrested for something, which I feel like the way that you've described it, you feel like was something that could have been avoided if there had been adequate support for your disability back then. And so after you were arrested, what options changed for you in life, and where did that take you?
Um, well, literally as soon as the judge said officially, I was a felon, I am a felon, um, things immediately changed because I had to tell my boss at the time. And at the time I was working a full-time job and I was making employee of the quarter. And so I was kind of chugging along, and I was chugging along at that job because everything was, every single day was the same,
Mm-hmm.
so it worked for me. But when I told them, listen, guys, I've been officially charged with a felony, they said, unfortunately, our corporation doesn't allow felons to be employed with us. So they let me go. And uh, actually, I ended up quitting. They didn't fire me, but I quit. And then I had to tell my landlord, this is what happened. And I was extraordinarily ashamed. Thank goodness she was completely laid back. She was willing to hear my story and not judge. So I was allowed to continue living there. However, finding work afterwards was truly a challenge, because as soon as they see that you have any place, it doesn't matter. As soon as they see that you have a felony, uh, it makes it 5 times harder, five times more difficult. And at the time, I didn't know about my disability myself, so I
Right.
couldn't explain about my
Right.
disability. I was just carrying a mountain load of shame and guilt, and absolutely didn't tell my family.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, who was like, it was my mom and I, we were peas and carrots my whole life. I couldn't tell her, but she also had early onset Alzheimer's at the time. And so I there was no way
Yeah.
I could talk with her about it. Um, and I really didn't have close friends, like forming friendships on a very deep, caring level. Certainly at that time when I was late 20s was non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
I if people were nice to me, they were my friends, you know.
Yes.
But
Yes.
they weren't my friends.
No, I see this
um,
in my yes. Kids I've parented, we have the struggles. I feel like in this stage, you were feeling like the symptoms of your disability were a moral failure, and that's a big struggle that I have when I'm talking to parents. Is that we can parse out the symptoms that we're working with versus like an actionable choice, like I'm deciding to not follow through on this, or I'm deciding to lie when we're talking about confabulation. And so you were carrying all of that yourself. There is
yes,
something wrong with me, and then this charge just kind of like sealed the deal on that. And so your options were very limited for employment at that point. So what did you end up doing?
so after time and time again trying to keep a job and hold a job, because any job I got to that point was fast food, it was convenience store, it was positions like that. You wouldn't think twice about the fact that it might actually be difficult.
Yeah.
But those kinds of jobs, if you think about it, they go bam, 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 bam. They're very quick. And my brain does not do that.
Yeah.
At the time, I just thought, you gotta listen, concentrate, listen, what's wrong with you? I was super hard on myself, but, other people would say the same thing back to me, like, why aren't you listening to what I'm asking you to do? Do this, and so the culmination was always frustrating. So I just went job to job to job, humiliating, was hardly able I don't even know how, quite frankly, thinking back, how I was able to live like in a rent wise. I can't even remember, other than my mother's financial help.
Mm.
And so I was befriended by a really nice guy, and I lay no blame or shame, nothing of the sort, on him. He was an incredible spirit. He really was. And I was just beside myself about what to do, and he knew it. And he ended up saying, I do. He's like, because he was a bartender. He said, but aside from that, some of the things that I do erotic massage, sex work, something that had never crossed my mind ever in a million years. The closest thing I'd ever thought of sex work, anything, was the movie Pretty Woman. That's as close as I knew anything about sex work. I didn't stop to think about it. And especially living here in Montana, where you would never think there were sex workers in Montana. I never stopped to think about it. But anyway, he said, yeah, I can make, you're your own boss. You can make your own hours. You can make your own rules. You can say how much you get paid, and of course, who does not find that appealing?
Right.
And that was super appealing to me, something that I had never thought to consider.
Yeah.
And so I tried it. And when I say I tried it, it wasn't just like, bish, bash, bosh, and now I'm a sex worker.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. It was tiptoeing around it. And at the time, Craigslist offered ads. So I posted an ad offering erotic massage, and you would not believe, like, my email was bombarded within a matter of an hour or two, bombarded with people. I was astonished, and I'm like, wow, like, I thought that I could be financially set really for the first time. And so then the next challenge came to actually going through with it. And that was another thing altogether, because all of your clients are different. They all have different attitudes. I have been robbed. I have been assaulted. I have been cheated on the money that is owed me. And mind you, these are all consensual appointments.
Right.
And so, but nonetheless, that is also part of what being a sex worker entails. You do run those high risks, and worse, of course.
Right.
I was very fortunate, but it really was difficult, because I had to interact with people I never would have wanted to ever interact with on an intimate level like that. And so my survival instincts went into like superhuman strength. And somehow for about the next 6 or 7 years, I was able to do it. And I can't say that I was necessarily successful at it. There are some women who were able to they were really savvy about being able to advertise themselves.
Yeah, so almost like business strategies. Yeah,
it really is a business strategy for a lot of them. They're very smart and quick, and they know. But me, I was just bumbling along. Truly, and hating every minute of it.
Yeah.
But to the people around me and the closest people around me at the time, I was already a felon. I was always homeless and trying to find some place to live. I had my cat with me since way before, and so it
Yeah.
was just me and my cat, really. And so here I am trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. And so, of course, I'm going to say, it's great.
Yeah.
It's great. You can make your own hours. Oh, he was a funny guy. Whatever lies I made up so people wouldn't look at me, as less of a
Yeah.
human than I already felt.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, than I already was in reality, because it was really hard it was really hard to maintain all of that. And then not understand why couldn't I talk about it in the manner that was going through my head. For instance, well, you made this much money in a day or a week. Why aren't you living in a really nice place? Why aren't you paying all of your bills? Why
Oh,
aren't you
yeah.
saving up? Why aren't you paying me back for the money I lent you?
Yeah.
Um, and I couldn't understand, again, at the time, finances for me, they're a deal breaker. Adam, my fiance, has to do all of the finances.
Yeah.
He helps me constantly with finances and money and understanding about savings, etc. But
Which
there
is a
was no Adam.
symptom and not like a moral failure on your part again. But you don't know it's a symptom if you don't know your disability.
Exactly. So, and then God forbid you want to try to make yourself feel better by, oh man, I think I'm going to go out and buy myself a steak dinner. Well, if you have money for a steak dinner,
Yeah.
kind of attitude from people. She's
Yeah.
doing fine. She's just being lazy
Yeah.
and willful and not. None of that was the
Right.
case. But there was no way I could uh, verbalize it. Um, one of the responses to trauma, one of the four responses to trauma is fawning.
Mm-hmm.
I fawned
Yeah.
a lot, and to very unhealthy, toxic people in my life, and I never realized that was what I was doing, but it was pure survival instinct for sure. Um, and then the day came where my mom passed away in 2013. I was completely alone because, like I said, my mom and we were peas and carrots.
Yeah.
And so when in 2013, early spring, late fall, she passed away. I really was at my wit's end.
Mm-hmm.
I had no support. My adoptive sister often chastised me about, she was more or less a pull yourself up by your bootstraps
Right.
kind of mentality, and you really shouldn't be doing this kind of work. Well, no shit. Sorry. You can beat that up. And and nothing to truly help me get out of the position that I think anyone really could have seen was not a position anyone would want to be in their life.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a familial support, and like I said, my friends really, they were very. I was just and I am still poor at making true friendships, because it's hard for me to judge certain things. And so I took what I could take. If they were
Yeah.
nice to me and they were nice to me, I took it. And,
Yeah.
they're really great. They're really great. They're not, in my head, they're nice to me. They're really great.
Well, I think you
And
want to believe, not only want to believe the best in people, but you want to believe you can have that sort of relationship with people. And so I see with kids that I parent that they're telling themselves a story about the situation. And while I can see that it's different if it's like peers that I'm seeing, like everyone wants to feel like they belong. So if you can't find that spot, then you're gonna convince yourself it is happening, even if the other person is not reciprocating. And judging whether someone is as invested in a relationship as you are is like super hard for most of us. But definitely for individuals with FASD, that could be very difficult, and therefore have not as many deep, meaningful friendships. I'm so thrilled that Adam is in your life. I want to meet both of you in person one day. But so what I hear you saying is that if we were looking at things that did not go right and things that could go better for other individuals who have disabilities and may be in a similar position, because what you're describing with having criminal involvement is, of course, very common. Individuals with FASD are 30 times more likely to be involved in the criminal justice system. And that's not because they have a moral failing. It's because we're not properly accommodating their disability. So one thing that sounds like it could have been super beneficial to you is an earlier diagnosis. We could have known what your disability was, and had not only the, like, in a relationship with like a sibling or your peers or whatever, you have verbiage to describe your disability versus you scrambling to explain your actions. That's really, I can't imagine being in that position. So early diagnosis would have been helpful for that reason alone, but also to get you services and support through like disability services.
Yeah.
And then that would have helped. I mean, and this was in 2013, so it would have been after, but the American Bar Association wrote an FASD resolution to explain how FASD could impact your clients. So if a lawyer is representing someone with FASD, it kind of like lays out what it means and how that could impact someone's judgment. And so all of those things could have been helpful to you, and hopefully will be used for other individuals in the future, as well as strong family support. And if we're in this position where we're struggling with jobs, which is kind of what we're talking about this past week, we talked about employment for individuals with disabilities. In our head, we think if you can maintain a job, you're a hard worker, and if you can't maintain a job, you're lazy. And those things, that dichotomy is not what's happening for individuals with
No.
disabilities. So you found sex work to almost be an accommodation in that you set your own hours, but also a lot of responsibility to maintain the business side of it, which is, I let my husband do that for me too. So it was almost
It's
like
really hard. People wouldn't realize it. It is hustle. It is a hustle.
yeah,
And it's hard. And your life depends on it because you never know who your client or your John might be. So
in where you were working in Montana, were more of your peers Indigenous as well? Is there a higher rate of Indigenous sex workers?
that's one thing I really can't tell you because sex workers either choose to meet other sex workers or they don't. And
Okay.
I chose not to. I met one, and she was big trouble, and so
Well, it's
I
good you
just
could tell, though.
I just stayed away. I also did what are called tours. It's so silly, but I moved after I was done with probation here in Montana. I wanted to get the heck out of here, and so I thought I could make a brand new start in Portland. Um, but I carried my disability along with me, of course, undiagnosed, and an ability because of my felony to find work, and I didn't have transportation. Portland is enormous. The bus systems are very, very confusing. Um, and so then I had to turn back to sex work.
Yeah.
And being a sex worker in a city is completely different than being a sex worker in a smaller community like Montana. And I can't say that now. I don't know what it's like because it's been a minute since I've
Right.
since I've been doing this. So
Yeah.
things may have drastically changed. I do know that there are other Indigenous sex workers. I remember seeing their ads. I never got to know their stories though. I know just by communicating via email with some of them, because there's some you feel comfortable with enough to reach out via email and say, hey, is this guy safe? Or what do you think about this working in this location? Or, are the cops, are the cops a danger here or not? All this stuff. You sort of reach out that way. And, I felt like sex workers then anyway really had one another's backs and would let you know. And then there were a few that would be competitive,
Mm-hmm.
just not tell you. you know
Well,
um,
I think that something that so this I should have reviewed, but this month in December we are both participating in Dresscember. I have my dress. You can't see it because
I have my
oh
dress.
yes, lady. So we're participating in Dresscember to raise awareness and funds for human trafficking. The link is in the bio for the CSH collab. And so right now our new goal is that we're trying to raise $10,000 as a team, which sounds crazy, but um, we're only $750 away from it though, which is also
I know, I was just saying, you're zooming along, everybody is zooming along. It's incredible.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
wanted to, this of course, when we're talking about disabilities and we're talking about human trafficking, this is one of the gaps. Like, how do we help protect individuals with disabilities from being trafficked? And you were not trafficked, but I think that your story helps kind of lay out what it looks like if I cannot maintain employment, whether because of a criminal history or not. But of course, that makes it much worse. And so then, you were talking about judging people and whether they were in your best interest or not. It's imagine that in a trafficking situation where someone comes up and offers you something and they convince you that they're in love with you, and then it's so easy. So how do we help protect this, this younger generation? And early diagnosis is key for so many different aspects of success with a disability. Of course, FASD, only about 1% of our population is diagnosed, so it's not very common to have a diagnosis. But that's why we're talking about this in conjunction with the, different brain-based disabilities that we talk about in the collaborative. So I really appreciate you sharing. It's a very vulnerable story, but I think it's very powerful to share how, I mean, you're such an impressive person, right? Like every time you send me words, I'm like, oh my gosh, like we have to figure out how to get you to write a book. But
I know, I've been through the gamut. Oh my gosh, it's a colorful life.
but I think it's very persuasive to people who may be like, family members of individuals, and maybe their family members even diagnosed, but they don't get FASD enough, and that empathy piece is so important to help people succeed. And so you can't just say, oh yeah, I know you have disability, whatever. You have to be empathetic to the symptoms and understand how to accommodate them, which is the information we try to provide in the collaborative so that people can be more successful. So your story helps with the empathy piece big time. You're very powerful. So thank you so much for sharing such a vulnerable story. I appreciate it. I really do.
Well, thanks for asking me back on. I hope you have a fun vacation over
Yeah.
there, and I hope maybe you'll see a whale or a seal.
Oh, we look so hard on the ferry over here, but we're going to go get lost in the woods now.
Good.
All right. Bye,
Thank
Hisham.
you. Bye. Take care.